On episode 381 of the 40 Plus Fitness podcast, we meet Anna Cabeca and discuss her book, The Hormone Fix. You can find the full show notes for this episode at 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/381. Have you decided you're ready to make a change? To reclaim your health and fitness? The 40 Plus Fitness podcast is here for you. I'm your host, Alan Meisner. I'm an NSAM certified personal trainer with a specialization in corrective exercise and fitness nutrition. Let me be your coach as you find your way on your health and fitness journey. All right, let's go. Our guest today is a triple board certified and fellow of gynecology and obstetrics, integrative medicine, and anti-aging and regenerative medicine. She has special certifications in functional medicine, sexual health, and bioidentical hormone replacement therapy. She is known for her work using natural alternatives and traditional healing modalities for managing menopause successfully. She has also been on every major network and is all over the place, really knows her stuff, really knows her hormones, which is what we're going to talk about today. So with no further ado, here's Dr. Anna Cabeca. So Dr. Cabeca, welcome to 40 Plus Fitness.
It's great to be here with you, Alan. Thanks for having me.
I'm a fitness guy, personal trainer and whatnot, but one of the things that I've come to recognize is that we can only do so much in the gym or on the beach or in our homes doing exercise and things like that. If we're not managing the other aspects of our lives, particularly our hormones, we're not really going to get to the point of health that we want to go. So I was really excited to be able to feature and talk about your book, The Hormone Fix.
Oh, I'm glad. I love talking about it. And you're absolutely right. And even in my practice, right, it takes more than hormones to fix our hormones. So these are all important components that work together.
And that's where, when I got into your book, I was thinking, okay, we're going to talk about testosterone. We're going to talk about estrogen. We're going to talk about thyroid. And that's where most of the time when you start this hormone conversation, particularly for people over 40, that's the direction that conversation goes. And there's just kind of an expectation that those are going to solve everything. But you have a very different view, in my mind, of how we can fix and manage and balance our hormones.
Yes, absolutely. You know, it's so true, especially as a gynecologist. I'd love to say it's all about progesterone, estrogen, even testosterone and DHEA. But the truth is it's not. And through my own personal journey and just working with so many patients through menopausal transition, we have to get to the underlying reason, the underlying major players. And those major players are insulin, cortisol, and oxytocin.
And I want to dive into each of those because I think on the show, I've talked about insulin a good bit because I talk about keto a lot and they understand that keto is a way to manage insulin resistance. So we've talked about that a good bit. I've talked about cortisol a lot because that was kind of my last thing that I've been working on, trying to get myself as healthy and well as I can, is the stress relief of moving to Panama, having a slower pace of life, not having as many moving things that are going on, shedding the house that could get hit by a hurricane. And then the oxytocin is kind of the one that I know what it is, I guess, but we don't talk about it a lot. When I'll say this, I define wellness as being the healthiest, fittest, happiest you can be. And this really kind of fits in that notch of that third one. But could you just kind of walk through each of those and talk about what they mean to us in our health and how getting those balanced actually kind of juxtapositions us to get the rest of them in order?
Yeah, absolutely. And for so many people, we don't really understand oxytocin. It's a hormone. It is the most powerful hormone in our body. At least that's my point of view. I call it the crowning hormone, the real light of hormones. And it is the hormone many women first come into contact with externally with Pitocin during labor. It's the hormone we inject in women during labor and delivery to increase the amount of contraction strength, to help the baby come out and be born. And that is that hormone, whether we've had injectable Pitocin or not, that contracts the uterus, but that forms that bond that really defies all words, right? We can talk about this bonding with the infant, our babies, but when we feel it, when we look into that baby's eyes and we feel this imprinting, this connection, it's undeniable. That's oxytocin. That's the power of oxytocin, the feeling of love, happiness. And I love your pillars, the healthy, fit, and happy, right? So happy is oxytocin, that happiness hormone. And we can't have high, crazy, stressed cortisol levels and burning ourselves out, then depleting cortisol or suppressing it, and healthy, happy oxytocin at the same time. It doesn't work, not without a lot of discipline, practice, meditation. And I think, maybe this Dalai Lama's got it down. But for most of us, certainly for me, we find that we have that suppression. Oxytocin's low and cortisol's low at the same time, especially if we've been under stress for a long time. And now we have this burnout phenomena, which is when we feel disconnected, when like that person that we've loved and want to spend our whole life with, we no longer feel love for them. And I heard my patients say that so many times, and I experienced this myself post-trauma, this disconnect, this feeling of not loving the things you always loved and not wanting to do the things you've always loved doing. So that's the power of oxytocin. We also associate it with joy. It's a natural pain reliever. It's a natural appetite suppressant. And even studies in elderly, we have shown an increase in muscle growth. So this oxytocin hormone is one that we can, for free, increase in our body through some great principles and practices and managing cortisol as well.
One of the things that kind of really, when I was reading through that, I was thinking, this makes so much sense, because if you've read like the Blue Zones or Dr. Day's The Longevity Plan, they talk about how the longest lived people on earth have these social bonds, and they're spending time socially with their family, and their meals, they're sitting down together and they're having this time together where they're having that joy, they're having that laughter and that fun. And that's what's creating this hormone and circulating this hormone, and it's keeping them alive longer.
Yes, absolutely. That sense of community, that connection, that energetic bond. Alan, one of the things I always tell my clients to give them a real perspective is, we always talk about resveratrol, right? Beautiful antioxidant, powerful superfood. Resveratrol found from grapes, right? Red wine. So we talk about have your glass of red wine, you'll get your resveratrol, that's heart healthy. But is it really? I believe that it's the community we have that glass of wine with, the laughter, the joy, the celebration, that makes that a medicinal food, right? Versus if we're drinking a glass of wine by ourselves tonight. That's not medicinal.
Or in your pantry eating dark chocolate.
Right. But I always say I love dark chocolate. I love red wine. I love coffee. And as a researcher, I have researched thoroughly the benefits of my three vices.
I do too. So now you got into a concept in the book, which I've read a little bit about, but not a lot. So I'm going to profess ignorance on this one. And I'm going to ask you to take me down the line, because you talk about having a diet that's alkaline versus acidic. And what I've known before I read the book, and you kind of confirmed in the book, was that our body has a pretty good mechanism for making sure that our blood acidity, or pH, is at a particular range. And it's a very, very tight range. And if it gets outside of that range, we've got some major health problems. So our body is very protective of making sure that we stay in the range. So I guess I was confused to say, okay, if I eat the wrong foods, and obviously the foods you named as acidic, I was like, okay, well, you shouldn't eat a whole lot of those, or any of those in some cases. The things that are alkaline, I'm like, yeah, you should be eating a lot of those where you can. And it all kind of made sense, but I was wondering, if I eat something that's acidic, does it really affect my body that much? And in the book, you kind of explain how it does.
Yeah, it really does. And over time, it's the wear and tear phenomenon that we experience, especially as we're getting older. So one of the things that you're absolutely right, our blood pH is maintained. As a doctor, as a physician, if someone came in my emergency room crashing, I'd pull a arterial blood gas, and I'm looking at the pH of that blood gas. And that's from the artery in the wrist pumping, right? Blood fresh from the heart. So that's what we're talking about. That pH is so well maintained, slightly alkaline at approximately 7.4, and it doesn't shift, very rarely at all. But now the question is, how do we maintain that very exact pH when the conditions are not optimal, when we're under stress for a long time, maybe dehydrated for a long time, maybe in starvation mode for a long time? eating inflammatory foods for a long time. How do we maintain that blood pH? And we have to maintain it from our electrolytes, right? Our minerals and nutrients, our muscle, our bone. And then we're seeing the results of that because that's kind of like a standard American diet. So we see osteopenia, osteoporosis in 30-year-old women. I thought that was a disease of 65-year-olds. That's what I learned, right? That's when we start checking.
You say osteopenia typically for a healthy person wouldn't start until they're 30, 35 years old. And in fact, when you go get a DEXA scan, the actual increments they use to base you is a 35-year-old woman. So
as the optimal,
you shouldn't be losing a lot of bone or muscle mass before the age of 35.
No, ideally. But we're seeing it. And so that has a lot to do with it. So what we find is that, measuring urine pH is a fabulous, easy, inexpensive way to monitor, just like if we were checking our temperature, or how our thermostat works on the wall to kind of maintain a good room temperature. But if we check our urinary pH, just like the weight on the scale, it's going to fluctuate if we've had an inflammatory food or we're swollen. Or for me, if I eat any dairy, I'm 3 pounds heavier the next day, right? So I can tell that didn't work with my body, but I can also tell in my urine. If I'm stressed, our urinary pH drops. So one simple thing I've had my clients do in my menopause program, now this is true for men and women, because over the past several years now, I've been working with clients and working through this keto green concept that I talk about in my book, The Hormone Fix. And that is check, test, don't guess, but check your urine, because your urine pH is a marker, is a guide, is an indicator of, okay, body's doing great. No, maybe is under a little bit of stress, maybe it's pulling some nutrients, and that urinary pH will tell us that. A healthy urinary pH is 7 to 8. And it will naturally go down after your intense workout, right? We expect to see lactic acid secreted in the blood during a workout, and also cortisol during a workout. And cortisol sensitizes these receptors in the kidney, and we get a decrease in urinary pH. So that's expected. But should it be expected after we eat, depending on what we're eating? Say, for example, if I eat some dairy, my urinary pH drops because it's a food sensitivity to me and it creates an inflammatory marker. So it's interesting. It's part of just those clues, just being able to discern, okay, this works good for me, this doesn't work good for me. And our body, our cellular pH is different at different places in our body. Our skin's a little acidic, the vagina's acidic, the stomach's acidic, the urine typically should be alkaline. And so different areas of our body will have different pHs. Our saliva should be alkaline. Our tears are alkaline. And so that's why when we jump into a pool, it's slightly alkaline, so it doesn't irritate our mucous membrane. So it's interesting how we can look and see how our body is reacting to our nourishment and our environment. And this is true in both men and women. And so when I came across this easy and expensive marker, right, because I've done, as a physician, I've ordered thousands of dollars of testing, functional lab tests for my private clients. And this tells us so much more. This helps the patient. This helps each individual figure out, okay, this is working for me. I need more alkalinizers in my diet, so more of the low carbohydrate, dark leafy green, mineral rich, organic veggies as much as possible to help from that aspect. I also need to stress manage and sleep well and meditate and get outside more. Those are other things that help our body become more, our urinary pH increase in alkalinity. The research has shown that when we see a healthier urine pH, that a higher urinary pH is associated with less metabolic disease, less hypertension, less diabetes, and less inflammatory conditions. So that's why I love it.
Yeah. And you got to that section and it was so interesting because I measure for success and, it's kind of a standard business mantra. And I did 30 years in corporate and it was what you measure gets managed, the tenet there. And I was thinking, okay, so here's going to be a list of labs that we can run out and we can get tested and figure out. But you took a little twist to that as well, in that a lot of this stuff, a lot of the things that we can measure, that they're free. I mean, how you're sleeping, how you're doing, and you have a series of almost like quizzes and tools in there to go through a series of tests as you will, that don't involve you getting pricked with a needle or going through anything kind of crazy like spitting into a tube all day long. Can you talk a little bit about some of these measurements that we can do? You talked about pH of the urine, and then you dropped the bomb on them too, as we're talking about keto here. So can you kind of talk a little bit about some of those measures that we can do that are cost effective and will give us a lot of information about how our hormones are balanced?
Yeah. This is something that I practiced. When I went to medical school, I really didn't know how I was going to pay for it, but I was blessed and I received a National Health Service Corps scholarship. So after residency, my OBGYN residency, I came to Southeast Georgia, small area. So I had quite a diverse range of clients, but I was the only bilingual obstetrician. So I had very much wide range of clients, and also from the islands, the Sapelo Island, the shrimping area. So very low economic areas. And I had to get really creative. So really found that the art of medicine is in listening to the patient, right?
Yeah.
And it sounds so simple, but it's absolutely true. So these inventories that I created are checklists. I hope people love checklists as much as I do, but I know if I have something on a checklist, I've got to check it off. And so I created checklists, but also inventories, questions like, how am I doing today? How am I doing in a week, a month from now? And that's where these inventories really help at a fraction of the cost. And I can see, despite what the labs are saying, because we always say, treat the patient, not the labs, right? We look at the labs for guidance, but we want to treat the patient, not the labs. And that's really important because normal is not optimal. And we want to be optimal. So
Can you
let's
say that again? Yeah, a normal is not optimal. I love that because, I mean, bless them. They 7 minutes in and out. Everything looks fine. See you next time. But, I don't feel fine. My energy level's down, I have fatigue, I've got pain, my joints hurt. You have these issues and you're normal. And we are kind of taught a little bit to kind of accept that that's normal. And if that's not going to insert for us, well, here's a pill. This will deal with the pain or the inflammation. And so I like that you have these kind of measures where we can look at this, because most of the folks I'll deal with, I'll be honest with you, they come to me because they want to lose weight. And I'll say, okay, weight is one measure, but it can't be the only measure, because you're going to love yourself one day and then you're going to hate yourself the next if that's the only measure you have. So I like that you've given us these inventories so that we can go through and say, okay, how do I sleep? How do I feel? What's my energy level? What's my pH? I like the fact that you've given us a lot of these little tools that we can measure so we can know that there's progress.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Like, we want to look well, right? But optimally, we want to feel well in our bodies. And so many of us have yo-yo dieted over the years. I was a fat kid. I struggled with my weight my entire life. I've been over 240 pounds and was diagnosed menopausal. Reverse that as part of my journey that I talk about in my book. But I've been there. I've struggled with my weight. The most important thing is that we feel well, because feeling well gives us willpower. Feeling well helps us make right choices. Feeling well is sustainable long term. We have the clarity of thought. We have the financial success, which comes with clarity of thought. And those are part of living an optimal life, right?
Yes. So your book, basically the plan, or where we're going to go with this, is that you said, okay, there's a place for ketosis to help balance hormones, and there's a place for an alkaline diet to help. And there's, evidence to support both of those, but you marry them together to come up with what you call keto green. Can you kind of explain the keto green way of eating and how it's going to help us feel better, be better, and optimize our health?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So when I hit menopause a second time in my late 40s, 48. And after having kept 80 pounds off for nearly a decade, watching the weight creep on, but struggling with focus, struggling with memory, struggling with relationships, all of that. But yet I knew I needed to get this weight off. And so that's when I pushed for getting my body into ketosis or doing a ketogenic diet. And however, I've known about ketogenic diets, low carbohydrate, Atkins diet types for decades. And for my neurologic patients, Parkinson's, seizures, etc. But whenever I would put, especially a perimenopausal client on it, she would come back and say, I feel irritable. I don't like how I feel on it. And that's what I experienced too, Alan. I called it going keto crazy. And I talk about this in the book. But let me tell you, if you're a mom, you've got teenagers, small kids, you cannot afford to be irritable, on edge. And keto crazy, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So I wanted to figure out what was going on. And so that's when I just said, okay, well, what's happening to my body? And I just started testing my urine again, because as a functional medicine doc, I always have my clients check their urine, get alkaline. And that's something that really helped me in restoring my health in my late 30s. So I started checking my urine. It was persistently 5. That's the lowest pH on my strip. It was 5. Who knows what it was, but it was 5 or less. Well, I'm like, no wonder I feel crappy, right? There's probably inflammation going on. I don't have the nutrients to nourish my cells, cell function, membrane health, etc., not to mention neurotransmitter support. And so it's like, okay, well, let me add in the greens. Let's add in the alkalinizers, the greens, and let's just bump this up, get alkaline and focus on that, and then go back into ketosis. And that was a huge combination. That was a huge awakening for me, an aha moment. It's like, wow, man, this feels amazing. And then I looked in literature, like over half the world fast regularly. Orthodox Christians fast 250 days a year. Catholics on general, if they're following it, fast or some type of fast every Sunday to have breakfast after communion. There's fast and Lent, 40 days of fasting. There's fast built into traditions over the millennia and tied to spirituality, because what I experienced was this, I call it energized enlightenment, this real clarity, this spiritual connection. And from going to a place where I used to have excellent memory, 100% visual memory, et cetera, to having brain fog, losing my memory, losing my focus, to regaining that at a higher level was incredibly enlightening as well. And that led me to look into the research and say, surely I'm not the only one who's put these two together. But there was one paper published in 1924 out of Cambridge that looked at combining alkalinity or alkalosis with ketosis. And it was an aha moment for me. It's like, yes, this is the key. This is how we really can create a healthy cellular and hormonal balance. And it helps to modulate cortisol. If we're looking at our urinary pH, a healthier urinary pH is associated with a healthy circadian rhythm or healthy cortisol levels, versus high cortisol is associated with low pH. And we know, again, high cortisol over time burns us out, does not give us that happy feeling, and kind of fights with oxytocin on the battlefield, so to speak.
Yeah. And the fact that you're in ketosis means you're managing your insulin at a relatively low level. You're making and potentially fixing insulin resistance. So it's a kind of a win-win.
Yes, exactly. That insulin sensitivity with the ketosis, the green component helping with cortisol management, and then bring in oxytocin, the principles and practices to create a quality, happy, joyful life. Then we have your healthy, fit, happy mantra.
Yes. I'm sitting back and I'm on social media. I'm following a lot of people and seeing what people out there are doing to kind of get an idea of what the trends are. And one of the kind of the trends that I'm really, really struggling with right now is this carnivore diet. And it's keto, but they're just meat and eggs. And it's kind of scary because I don't know what that train wreck is going to look like when they're done. You need nutrients from vegetables and fruits at some level. Now, not a lot of fruits necessarily, but you do need things from those. If you're not getting those, I just don't know what the long-term ramifications are going to be.
I agree with you. And believe me, I talked to Brian. I speak at KetoCon. I'll be speaking there in the summer at the end of June again. And I love those guys. And Brian, the creator of KetoCon, he is keto carnivore. And I was like, Brian, I don't know about maybe we should be checking your neurotransmitters. We should be watching your hormones. But bottom line is men and women are different. But all diets throughout millennia that have been successful have a strong plant-based component. I mean, we need the micronutrients from plants. But what could someone who is not able to get those plants, what do they do in order to nourish their body? And that's what I researched. I'm like, well, they talk that ketogenic people talk about the Inuits, Alaskan natives that eat basically fatty fish, right? And that's their diet. But they don't only. They also have the huge bone broth going nonstop that they will sip on. That's minerals. That's fish bone broth. That's rich in minerals to renourish their body. So intuitively or through necessity over time, they added in that alkaline or that green component through the mineral broth or bone broth. Isn't that cool?
Yeah, it is. Because one of the things that I was kind of going through structurally in my mind, and I talk about this in my book, is that I believe that we're opportunistic eaters. And that's one of the problems with having a McDonald's and a Starbucks on every corner, is that our ancestors would eat what was available in the season it was available. And so I could see, being from Northern Europe or the Northern Americans, there would be whole periods of time when there wouldn't be much plant matter at all. So you are at that point relying on animal products to sustain you. But then, yes, the spring's going to roll around and there's going to be some foliage, there's going to be some plant matter that you can eat. And I think that would just be a time when we would effectively go nuts because it was available.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so I just kind of looked at it and saying, okay, maybe being carnivore for a period of a few weeks or months, a couple months, maybe that might have been something that would have happened in our ancestors' past. But as soon as the plants came around again and were available, because they don't fight back and they're easy to catch because they don't run or swim away. So I just think that when you look at what our ancestors did and try to look at it reasonably, even talked about this a little bit about the different ways that people ate, and the study that I guess looked at several of them, and 87% of them were alkaline.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, how cool is that at some point? And then you think about traditions again, thinking as the fasting time periods. When are the majority of fasting time periods based in religions? In the winter months. So Lent is typically at the end of the winter season. So most likely fresh greens, et cetera, lots of foods aren't available. The resources, stocks piles or the pantries are very, very low, so to speak. And so there's a practical component. So as you're talking, it just brings to mind that with the keto carnivore, again, some people can do it, but I think, if they can do it, men and women are different. Women who are my primary clients that I work with and suffer with and feast with, we'd have to recognize that we are different and we can't do things that guys will do. Guys will do my program with their wife or partner, and they will do 2-3 times better faster. They'll lose 2 to 3 times as much weight faster. They'll feel better faster. That's just it. We are different. Men and women are different. Our hormones are different. But I created the Keto Green way, the diet and lifestyle components, to really optimize how we are as women as well, to really get into these little nuances, the insulin, the cortisol, and then of course the oxytocin, what really matters to us most, and bring that into this place. But when you were talking, I was thinking we need responsible eating, right? Responsible moderation or responsible feasting as we are as a community and as a society, to be able to enjoy and indulge, but really nourish our bodies in ways that make sense. And this is when I teach physicians, I always say, practice medicine that makes sense. We need to take that internally to our life. Okay, well, what really makes sense? What's sustainable? And how do I know what's working for me specifically?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I like what you said there, that the food, the Keto Green way of eating, is kind of the base for this program. But there is an entire lifestyle component I kind of wish we had some time to get into, but we're running low. So I define wellness as being the healthiest, fittest, and happiest you can be. What are 3 strategies or tactics to get and stay well?
Well, initially I would always say we want to go Keto Green, right? That's really important. But I've been in this moment of reflection, just looking at my life over the past years and decades, going from that struggle, dealing with 2 menopauses, early menopause at 38, going through another transition time at 48, and struggling at that point with so many aspects of my life till I turned it around this Keto Green way. And the first thing, it came down to like this mantra for myself, this strategy is, number 1, pause. We have to pause, take pause, be present. Really, I'd be able to just be in the moment. So I would say pause and then pray. And the third is prioritize. So pause, let's get in the moment. Let's really understand, where am I right now? And be able to accept that. Pause, let everything else that's going around us, stop the busy stuff, stop the racing. And for myself, I always say I went around the world to find out that everywhere you go, there you are, right? So pause is a real big one for me. I had to settle, I had to stop and really evaluate. And then the second, again, pray, just being able to meditate, pray, listen to that still small voice within you, the one that knows, oh yeah, I thought so. Oh, I've been thinking about that, or I've been wanting to do that for years. So give yourself that time to get into that space and then prioritize what means most for you in your life. What are the things and people that mean most for you in your life? Alan, I admire you for leaving everything that you had and moving to a new place, a new land, so that you prioritize your relationship and the rest of your lives. And that's key. That goes a big way, a big, long way.
Yeah, those are great. And it was, I'm here on an island, and at morning time, it's really, really quiet. There's a lot of activity during the day. You probably could hear some of that on this interview. But I got up this morning about sunrise and went out and did a walk on the beach and just enjoyed nature, enjoyed being there, and feel really good about it. So I like all three of those. So thank you for sharing that. So Dr. Cabeca, if someone wanted to get in touch with you, learn more about the book, The Hormone Fix, where would you like for me to send them?
Well, I would love for them to take a look at my book. I really feel there are gems in there for everyone. And it's at dranna.com. So DRANNA.com/book. And There'll be information and a free sneak peek into my book, The Hormone Fix.
Okay. Well, this is episode 381. So you can go to 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/381, and I'll be sure to have a link there. So Dr. Cabeca, thank you so much for being a part of 40 Plus Fitness.
Thank you for having me.
Now, before you get out of here, I wanted to ask you for a favor. If you enjoyed today's episode, would you become a patron of the show and give us just a little support? All I ask for is $1 an episode. You can do that through our Patreon page. Go to 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/support, and that'll take you directly to the Patreon page. I have multiple levels of support that you can do, but really $1 an episode is really all I'm asking. Go to 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/support and become a Patreon of the show. That's 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/support. And also, I'd like to give you something in regards. If you're interested in a free, no obligation consult, where I can literally go through and we could talk about your health and fitness goals, and I can give you some guidance, give you some strategies. We can talk about things that you can try to make this summer as awesome as possible. I want to help you be successful with your health and fitness goals. So if you'll go to 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/consult, you'll be sent directly to my calendar. It's not a sales page. It's nothing like that. It's literally just a calendar page where you can put in an appointment and speak to me via a Zoom conference. No obligation, no cost to you, 15 minutes, absolutely free. Go to 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/consult and book your consultation today. Thank you. Next time on the 40 Plus Fitness Podcast, we meet Michael Matthews and discuss his book, Bigger, Leaner, Stronger. Until then, have a happy and healthy day.